Hi, come on in.
And join in. It's the Very Merry Life. Hi, I'm Mary Hendricks, and you might know me as that relatable AF Mama over on Instagram who hopefully feels like an old friend at this point. And if not, it won't be long till it feels that way as we get raw, unfiltered, and very unapologetic in all things motherhood, marriage, sex, and more. From moments worth savoring to moments worth surviving, get ready to leave feeling seen and supported. You have a friend here now, so hey, take a seat. What's going on? All right. Hi, guys. Hi, Alicia.
Hello.
Hello. All right. So I am super excited for today's episode. I have Alicia with me from Authentically Alicia. I think that's your Instagram and TikTok handle. And I am not, I can't remember the exact, I know it was a TikTok that I found of yours. Mm-hmm. And I followed you because I forget which one it was, but all I know is that I immediately resonated with me. You know what? Actually, I do know at this point. I think it was one talking about the pranks on kids during Christmas.
Oh, yeah. I got bullied really hard on that video.
I'm sure you did. Yes. Because it's wrong. I full-fledged agreed with it. But I know I followed you on that, and I'm glad I sticked around and followed you because recently you've had a few TikToks blow up. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why I wanted to bring you on, was to be able to talk more about it and whatnot. But before we get into any of that, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name's Alicia, and I am a licensed mental health therapist in New York, and I own a group therapy practice. I have 6 clinicians right now with our practice. So we serve all of New York State, including New York City, which is amazing. I do the content creation on Instagram and TikTok, and then I also own a mental health apparel line.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And so when on TikTok, and you were recently featured on a Good Morning America ABC News article. That's awesome. Were you so nervous when they reached out to you?
I was dying for like a solid, like from the interview until the 2 days later when it was released, I was unwell, but it was a wonderful article, and I'm so thankful they reached out.
Well, I'm just glad that they're covering it.
Yes.
And getting into this, and if you are here listening and you've heard previous, episodes of mine, I covered one, and I did one about the whole Lindsay Clancy thing. Mm-hmm. And anyone, if you are brand new listening to this episode, I would recommend you look it up, but also tread lightly if you look up that case. I can summarize it. It was a mother who we are still kind of figuring out the details of all this, mm-hmm. but from what we know so far, it sounds like she was dealing with some sort of postpartum mental health crisis and ended up in tragedy with the murder of her 3 kids.
Yeah.
And there's no sugarcoating it.
Yeah.
And it's awful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely awful. But I touched on it. And when it happened, it absolutely shattered me, as it did, I think, many other mothers, mm-hmm. to a point where I think that the jump of seeing mental health stories being shared online just skyrocketed.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I've never seen more like smaller mom creators, like actually putting such vulnerable, stories and experiences out there, because, the internet can be a really scary place. And I think that people tend to like tread lightly. And so something about this case just really propelled, these like really important but vulnerable experiences that people have had.
Yeah. Well, and I know when it first, I found out about what had happened because someone had actually reached out to me on Instagram and messaged me and said, do you mind sharing this helpline because of what happened in Duxbury? And I'm mm-hmm. from New Jersey, so I'm not close to Massachusetts. So I didn't know about it because it wasn't on full media coverage yet. Mm-hmm. And I looked into it, read about it, and was like, oh my God. And so I shared it and then talked about it. But what was so intriguing for me when I first was learning about the case was seeing the overwhelming support from mothers on it, which was pretty fascinating to watch, because you saw the comments on social media from people who were not parents or men saying like, she's cold-blooded. Mm-hmm. How could she mm-hmm. do this? And then every comment pretty much from moms was like, this poor mom. And that stuck mm-hmm. out to me. I was like, what happened? I was like, what's going on here? And then that's where it just unraveled.
Yeah. Yeah. I touched on this in the Good Morning America article, but it could have been me was mm-hmm. so prevalent between therapy sessions that I was doing in the weeks following, the case breaking nationally, and also people on social media being like, No, I get it. Like, I totally understand. And yes, like we can also feel really awful and sad for the kids, but also have such like a deep understanding of like, I was so close to that, or like it really could have also been me. Like, that's how close, like our system allows us to get to, just a complete breakdown and deterioration of our mental health.
Yeah, well, that, and you just don't know. Like, I think that too. Like, you don't know what your mental health status is going to be in motherhood until you jump right in, and there's no
Yeah.
going back from it. So the moment you're
Yeah.
in it, you just don't know. And I know for me, like, I've always had a, I don't want to say I've always been stable with mental health. I probably just like have just put a smile on my face for a majority of my life,
Masked it
but
very well.
yeah. So, but I'm always been like a happier person. I've never been diagnosed with anything that's been tremendous, but I know that with, my first, I have 3 kids. I know with my first, I definitely dealt with, intrusive thoughts. Well, God, I will forever remember the first intrusive thought that ever popped into my head. And even to this day, I can't even say it out loud because it just makes me sick to my stomach. And, then even with my son, I got postpartum depression, but it was during the pandemic. So no
Oh,
one like, there was like
gosh.
no help. And I think it was like depression that was like also pandemic depression. I
Yeah.
think everyone was depressed. So it just
Yeah.
was like, you didn't know what was what.
Yeah.
And then with my third, who is about to be 1, so it's been, I'm almost a year postpartum anxiety. Tremendous,
Yeah.
tremendous, tremendous. And it's just been something where, even I went to my provider for my annual checkup a few weeks ago. And I just told him because I'm weaning from breastfeeding and
Hmm.
that's messing with me
Oh,
hormonally.
yeah.
And I had no
No
clue
one,
about
no one
that.
tells us that, but
No,
yeah.
I had no clue that that could happen.
Hmm.
And because my other kids kind of cut me off cold turkey, and I don't know if I realized it, but this one is holding on for dear life. And mentally, I'm so torched by it. But I'm like going through the workings of it. And I tell them, I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more anxious than usual. And they're like, well, it's probably just a more emotional. And I'm like, well, it is. But also, like, I think there's something more going on than just that.
Yeah. Like I feel like I could talk about like the provider end of this forever because
Yeah.
it's very disappointing. Like
Yeah.
I follow so many amazing OBGYNs on like social media, and I wish I could remember their handles, but I can't right now. But they talk so much about like, the client-centered care and autonomy and choice and like all these wonderful things. But I think unfortunately those types of providers are a dime a dozen. Like
Yeah.
from the experiences I hear in the therapy room or on social media, it's very quick and not thorough and dismissive, and it's like borderline neglectful for people
Yeah.
that are bringing their experiences to, these providers that are supposed to help them. And
Yeah.
they're just, kind of shooed away essentially and said like, we'll see you in a year for your next annual. And
Yeah.
it's very disappointing. It's very
Oh, it's good.
disappointing.
Yeah. Well, and I actually did a reel. I did a reel on Instagram, and I shared it on TikTok, but it was essentially like, this is what maternal mental health looks like. And it was a video of me dancing with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like a happy video,
Oh, I
but
saw
then
that one.
it panned
Yes.
over. Yeah, it panned over. But on Instagram, it blew up a little bit harder than on TikTok. And the stories that came in, if you read through the comments, it just boils your blood, because some of them, like I know one was like, I went to my provider and I told her how I was feeling, and she said, you have makeup on and you're dressed, you're doing okay.
Oh my
And that's like,
gosh.
but that's like the thing is like, and that was like the whole caption of my post for Instagram was like, there's not one look to this. Like, there isn't just like, in the Lindsay Clancy case, that's a clear example of it, is like this mom. And I think that's what hit a little bit harder, is like, and not to say that I think we have an idea in our head as to what poor mental health looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of it as, not that. We think of it as being disheveled or lower income, like even like something like that, where we have, these, I don't know word I would use for it, but you have this idea. And when you see like a middle class white woman in a suburbs who had it seemingly all
Mm-hmm.
together do this because she was struggling silently with postpartum mental health, that's where it really helps, where it's like she had the support, she had things access, to access hopefully, and it failed her because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't good enough. And it really makes you think about those who don't have access to that stuff, where you're like, oh God.
We'll be back after a quick break. Eye-Opening Moments podcasts are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing too about like, I keep calling it like the system because I don't really know what else to refer to it as, but being a provider in this system, I've worked in like hospital-based systems. I've worked for the VA, for the federal government, and now I'm in private practice, and knowing the inner workings of the system does not help me to get my clients access to care. Like I know what to say to insurance companies. I know what to say to providers, and still there's like new barriers being put up all the time. There's new insurance barriers. There's new referral barriers. Just because somebody's in therapy doesn't mean they can get medication, and vice versa. And sometimes it doesn't matter like how well connected or, how privileged or how much access you have. Like there's just so many nuanced barriers that are just alive and well,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what it's looking like. And that's why these conversations need to freaking keep on happening, because it's just, it is bonkers. But
it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. So you shared a TikTok, and that's why I want to talk about this, because you shared a TikTok and about intrusive thoughts. And I know that that's like one of those that when I've asked women about like I like to cover taboos. So like even on this page, on my podcast and on my page, I like to cover taboo subjects that are really hard. Like I'm not afraid to go to bat for some people and just say like the shit, because
I love it.
I know that people feel it. So I'm like, whatever. But intrusive thoughts is one of those that you blew up. I forget how you got millions of views on that.
Oh my gosh. I think TikTok, it's up to like 3 million, I think.
Yeah. And I'm sure the comments coming on that one are,
they're tough. Well, I should say like, kind of like what you're saying about talking about the taboo subjects, like I post from the lens of a therapist most of the time. Like, of course, like I had my own postpartum experiences, so I, throw those in occasionally. But I have a therapist. I have a support system. Like the comments don't necessarily like bother me. People saying they're going to call CPS on me, et cetera, et cetera. But my issue is the other moms that I know are scrolling through the comments looking for people saying like, oh, I have these too. Or like, I never knew what these were called. And then they're reading those comments that are like, CPS immediately. I can't believe you're even having a kid if you're feeling like that. Terrible mom.
It scares the shit out of everyone. Yeah, because no one's used to it. And the comments typically are coming from like 14-year-olds who have 0 kids, who have no clue what they are even doing. Or men. It's always men. Oh my God. And I hate saying that. Like I've tried to say that so delicately, because I'm not like someone that's like anti-men. Obviously, I'm married. I love my husband. I have a son. But I'm like, I'm anti-angry men. Like I just get so frustrated, because I even had one on the TikTok that I mentioned I made. Someone commented on that one of like me saying like, this is what maternal mental health looks like, and said it takes a strong person to admit that something like that, like weakness, or it's like it takes a strong person to admit that they can't handle this, or like something. It was like nasty, but it's a guy. It was a man that said it. And I was like, fuck off, like get out of here. Like, what do you even know?
Right. Yeah. No, and I totally agree. I'm so careful not to like man bash. And I definitely like don't ever like on social media, because I have a son and I have a husband.
Yeah.
But I think it's also okay to hold people accountable. Like, you're kind of being shitty right now. And, one of my favorite comments was, imagine her son seeing this, or her kid seeing this 18 years from now. And I respond to those comments, and I like very delicately am just like, so here's my view. And if you don't agree, that's okay. But you don't have to like come for me on the internet. I want my son to know that these thoughts exist. If he chooses to have a baby with a woman down the road, I don't want him to shy away from these conversations or be as uncomfortable as you clearly are in the comments. Like,
Yeah.
you're uncomfortable. And like, that's
Well,
okay to
that's
be
what I always
uncomfortable,
say.
but you don't have to attack people, you know?
No, no. Well, and I always say, like, I do all of this, and like overwhelmingly, I do this podcast. I do my Instagram page, one, for me because I enjoy it and it's like
Yeah.
my creative thing. But overwhelmingly, I do it for my kids because I
Yeah.
don't want them to deal with this crap when they get older if they choose to have
Yes.
kids. Like, I want this to be a
Yes.
much better experience because I truly think that motherhood, like, I'm hoping that right now, what today is the peak of our motherhood hardship. Like, I hope that this is
Mhm.
the hardest it's ever going to get and we can go back down the hill and make it a little bit easier and come
Mhm.
together and like normalize these conversations a little bit so that way when they do come, they're a little bit more normal and they're a little bit less scary to deal with and we can talk
Yeah.
about it and work through it together. And that's what
Yeah.
I want. And so like for me, like I hope my kids see the shit that I put out there. Like I hope
Yes.
that it's me. Like they know me. So I'm hoping that they are honest and open enough to know that like I'm a human. I've had struggles and I hope that they realize that. And I don't want my kids to put me on some pedestal of
Mhm.
being like, my mom was perfect. Like, yeah, I am perfect to them, but I hope I'm not perfect in like a unachievable perfection type of thing, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like I'm the perfect mom for them, but not unattainable
Yeah, no,
sense.
totally. And I think like the
Yeah.
whole like breaking the stigma of things is kind of like running its course and becoming a little like overused. So I keep
Yeah.
leaning into like, I just want people to feel comfortable talking about it. You know, like
Yeah.
I have a niece, I love her dearly. If she has a baby one day, like I want her to be comfortable being like, I'm having these really fucked up thoughts. Like, what's up with that? Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, am I crazy? Like, did you have this? You know, and I just can't see, you know, I'm speaking majority wise. I just can't see our generation going to our parents with that kind of thing, you know?
No, well, and I didn't. I mean, I
I
haven't. Like
didn't.
I started therapy and I even told my mom's like, why are you going to that? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, because I want to, like, I think it's healthy for me. And I'm like, I think that's really good for me. And my mom is the generation like where my mom and dad are,
Yeah.
they don't do any of that stuff. Like none of it. Like, it's just one of those things that it's like, no, I'm good. Like, but it's, yeah, it's hard. I can't, there's a lot that's like untouched with that older generation and it's slowly getting easier but I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with the future generations, our kids and such.
Yeah, totally. And I don't like to make generalizations, but I do click on the profiles of people who have just like really terrible comments. And I'm like, who could possibly say, you know, people come and I'm sure you get the same comments like the internet's forever. You couldn't waterboard this information out of me. And it's like, well, I'm, you know, making a video on an educationally and research based thing that's happening. Like you're just
Yeah.
kind of being mean to people. Like that also
Yeah.
lives forever, you know?
Yeah. Well, I
The
actually
irony
did.
of it is, you
I
know,
did a video on Instagram last weekend because I shared about mom rage on
mm, oh,
on my
people
main
get
page, but
triggered about that.
oh yeah, but I shared about it a while ago because I had a moment of getting really exploding and kicking a toy and it was a really bad luck, but I kicked a toy and I shattered a window near me. And that wasn't my intention. I just kicked it and it went directly to the window, which was even worse because then we couldn't
Oh
get it
my.
fixed for like, yeah, it was bad. We couldn't get it fixed for like 8 weeks.
So you just
Because
had to stare at the broken window forever.
I had to like take my kids out and like go
Oh my
board it
God.
up, like stare at this like masking tape and like situation. It was awful. There's nothing like having a moment like that and then have it stare at you for like 8 weeks after.
The
But
consequences of your actions.
yeah, no shit.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I shared about it and I'm so glad I did because like I mean I even got a message the other day from a mom that sent me a picture and she said talk about mom rage staring at you in the face and she got so mad that she slammed a brush down on the counter and it bounced back up and it cut her right underneath her eye. And so she
Oh
sent me a
my
picture. But like
gosh.
that's the stuff that I get sent messages and I'm like I'm so proud of you for like owning it.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, I'm like, take a second after that happens. And like, there's always something that leads to it. Like, there's always
Mm-hmm.
something that's happening. Like, I know for me, it's always it's something going on with me. And usually it's because I'm not having something met. But anyhow, I shared about it over on my main page, and then I reshared it on the podcast page. And I had one comment come in. It was from a man. And it was, his name was Micah Castle. Hi, Micah. Fuck off.
Hi,
And
Micah. Glad to have you here.
Yeah. So I actually responded because I went, same thing. It was a picture of him holding his son. So I clicked on it. And then I couldn't find, his profile was private. So I was like, I'm curious now. So I was like, I went on Facebook. Yes. And so I typed in his name and I found the same exact photo of him. So I went, and his Facebook was a little bit more public. And I went and I found out he's a nurse. So I like took I captured the photo and I made a whole video. You can find it on my Instagram, but I made a whole thing talking about like mom rage. And because his comment was saying, this is pathetic. My wife would never do something like this. Grow up. Like, that was his thing. So I went through in my response saying like, I said, I'm so glad to know that your wife isn't dealing with the things that exacerbate mom rage, such as struggles with mental health, that her support system is there, that she isn't dealing with financial stress, work stress, like all the things that like literally make mom rage more prevalent. And I said, I'm so glad that she is getting the support from her family, her friends, her community, her spouse. But see that last part right there? I don't think that that's true. So I'm willing to believe that she might be struggling silently. And I said, are you saying this shit to her? And more so than I pulled up a picture of him as a nurse. I said, are you saying this to your patients? I like full went out. Yeah. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to call you guys out on bullshit.
Yeah.
I was having, it was the first day of my period. So I was feeling a little bit ragey that day, but I was like, done.
I fully believe though that we can hold people accountable in like a kind and non-judgmental way. You know, like, I think that like facts are loud, and I think that they can be louder than the hate that we get sometimes. And like, because, you know, hate is usually driven by emotion. So once the emotions settle, it's like, what's the substance behind it? I'm very careful in like responding to comments because like I try to keep like everything like as professional as possible, but I do respond to some hate comments and I'm just like, yeah, let's have a conversation. Like, what do you think is psychotic about this? And also what do you mean by psychotic? Like, that's kind of like an oldie word that like we don't really use here anymore. So like, are you uncomfortable? Or do you need more information about this? Like, you know, give me some more context here. Don't just
and that's what I said. You know, and I didn't even respond. Like, there was no cuss words in my response. Yeah. There was no saying like, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm saying that now, Micah. But I was like, I didn't do it because same thing. I wanted that, like, I wanted it to speak louder. I wanted this to essentially use him as a way to like get the message out there for women who are dealing with it. And what was funny was actually like, I had my followers, because they're loyal. They're like,
I love that.
They're crazy, but they actually messaged me and they're like, so I found his wife. And I'm like, don't tag her. And I actually like went through and I had to respond to some of these, and I was like, I removed her, and I was like, please don't tag her. I was like, because I challenged him. I said, please, in like the reel, I said, go share this with your wife. I said, if you're brave enough, go tag her. Like, let's get her involved in the conversation. Yeah. And that was for him. And I just said to my followers, I was like, please don't tag her. I was like, she doesn't. One day I'm assuming she's probably going to see this. And funny enough, someone had actually pointed out that she probably has seen my page before, because he's on the shared Wi-Fi, and whatever most stuff, like when it's seen on shared Wi-Fi, she's probably, that's why my stuff came across his profile. But I said, don't tag her. I said, because she doesn't need to know. And chances are she probably is already aware that this is going on. Because there's either two things going on here. One, he's actually a really great human being and a decent dad and a decent husband. And the internet just brings out his inner bully, because it's just like a release of some inner shit that he's working through. Totally. Or B, he's truly like this at home, and and seeing this won't make the situation any better for her. So, you know, I don't need to blatantly put it in her face. If she comes across it, I can't do anything about it, but I'm not going to just share it and push it her way and be like, look at the situation, which I'm sure she's probably already aware of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And exactly what you said. I mean, whether she's tried to, you know, maybe come to him with concerns or, just having, off days and gauging his reaction from that. I think we all know like the level of support that we're going to receive from our partners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I have and this is like another topic because you're a therapist, I can actually pick your brain on this one. So
Yeah.
I actually had someone I share about, like, we share, about the hard parts of motherhood. And I had a friend of mine who reached out and she was so upset because she had said, I share about the hard stuff with my friends. And I had a friend that told me, you're too toxic, like the relationship, it's too negative. And she cut her out. And she said, what sucks is that I open up and then I get told to shut up. But then we also are encouraging moms to open up. And she said, and then at the same time, we're also telling moms to protect their peace. So she said, what's the fine line of be open, protect your peace type of thing? How do we allow both to exist at the same exact time?
Yeah. So I think number one is like finding that safe person to be able to do that with. And I think that they present themselves in different ways. So like I'll use myself personally as an example. So like my husband and I met with like a lactation specialist while I was pregnant, and she actually recommended like, you need to have a keyword or a key phrase. Like if you're struggling, if you need a break, if you need to cry, if you just generally feel like very like alarmingly unwell, like you need a keyword to say to your partner. Because, and as a therapist, it made sense because I'm like, yeah, in the moment, do you know how hard it is to go to someone and be like, I'm concerned because like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I know it's not right,
Yeah.
So we implemented that, and it was wonderful because when I said it, when I was in the crux of like postpartum depression and anxiety, like he knew to kind of like drop everything and just kind of like sit with me through it. My best friend, like as soon as I was postpartum, like sat me down and was like, how are you doing? Like, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? So I say that to say, I think safe people will present themselves. And if you are surrounded by people or, a person who's never talking about, the shit of motherhood, or they're never talking about, having off days or being sad or having mom rage, like, I think the protecting your peace is like not bringing it up to that person. And I think you can, keep them in your life. Like, everyone serves a purpose in your life, but they're not going to be your safe person to, confide in about these things.
Yeah. Yeah, because that I felt bad for her. I felt so bad when she reached out to me. She was so upset. She was like, I try. She said, I'm trying to open up. And then I was like, I basically was told like, you're too negative. And I was like, so what if you are? Like, you got to be someone. I'm a good listener. I'm not the best at giving advice usually. I'm just like, I'm here to listen because there's probably nothing you can say that would shock me at this point because I felt it all. I felt it all and I've heard it all. So I'm like, it's fine. But
exactly.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because we're still in that limbo zone of like, be open, but not too much. Dial it back if it's a little too much.
Right. We're still like feeling people out and we're like, where do you stand on the continuum? Like, are you a listener? Are you going to judge me? Are you going to hold it against me? I've heard some people say like, I'm afraid to talk to my friends about it because I'm afraid they won't want to bring their kids around me. Yeah. I'm like, well, that might not be a very good friend then, like,
yeah.
They should.
Well, I know. And I know for me, like I was really nervous about ever opening up because I didn't want, and my husband would never do this. I just didn't want anyone to ever think that, just my whole family in general, I don't want anyone to ever think that I can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten better this time where I'm like, I can't handle it sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I don't know why that is such it was such a stressor in my life. And it was because like, I wanted my kids. Like I wanted my kids. I wanted this dynamic of my family. And I got so nervous that if like they had a meltdown in the grocery store, if they had a meltdown anywhere, that someone would look at me and be like, oh, she's above her head. She can't handle this. And I'm like, who cares? Like there are some days that I really can't handle it. And that's okay because technically I shouldn't be handling it by myself anyhow. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
This was never meant to be done solo.
Oh, don't even get me started on like the village, my videos that I make about like, where's the village? Like, I'm open to joining at any time. Like those always perform really well, which is very sad. But I think so many people are truly like doing it either just with their partner or with like the smallest circle of people. Like, they don't have like the extended family support that I think used to exist. And they don't have like, I just saw recently this local restaurant that banned kids. Like they banned
What?
children from
They
going.
can do
And I'm
that?
like, I know. And I'm like, you are like furthering this idea that like moms are not supported. Like, why can't moms bring their kids to a restaurant and not be judged, you know?
Well, because we're the drudge of society at this point. Like, the anti-kid movement is actually kind of terrifying to me, and it's one of those
Yeah.
things that like stresses me out whenever I get on social media because I'm like, I can't, like,
Yeah.
especially when I read through the comments because I'm like, the generation right now, the ones that are on like the 14-year-olds that are on there commenting scare me because
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this, and it freaks me out a little bit because they're so angry
Mhm.
and they're so uninformed and they're just the lack of empathy and anything is just gone
Mhm.
with a lot of them. And it freaks me out because I'm like, what's happening? Like how, I don't like thinking about it, but
I
something's going
know.
on. We need to fix it. But I think I don't know. Yeah,
I
I don't have
know.
answers for that
I
one.
know. And it's such a fine line because like I think women should be able to say like child free by choice. Like maybe they're
Yep.
just and like that's cool. But like being like anti children is like the part of that that's like maybe like let's take a step back here, you know?
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm always open with that. Like I had a girlfriend of mine that was over this past week. She stayed the night because she was traveling and I was like her pit stop.
Love that.
And she stayed over and we were up late and we were talking about like kids and stuff like that. And she said, yeah, I definitely want kids. And she's 30 and hoping to be engaged at some point. But she's like, I want kids. I don't want them anytime soon. And I was like, well, wait. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
you're talking, I had, I'm 33. I have 3 kids or
Mhm.
almost 32, almost 33. And I said, I have 3 kids. And I said, I don't regret it for a single thing, but it's hard.
Mhm.
And that's why I talk about it. I was like, I will never tell anyone to like just jump in head first. Cause I'm like,
Mhm.
it's not like this sunshine and roses all the time. Like this is a real deal thing. And it's not, I think it's like a wedding. You know how people like think about just the wedding portion of their entire marriage. They think about just
Mhm.
the idea of like dressing up a cute baby and having like
Mhm.
this cute moment where they forget it's like, it's forever. Like it's a
Literally forever.
forever thing. You cannot,
Yes.
once you step in, you cannot back out. Like
Yeah.
I mean, well, you technically can, but I doubt you will. Like it's
Right.
just like,
Well,
it's
because
one
then
of
you
those
love
things
them.
that
Then you're attached.
yeah. So it's like, it's not, we joke, but it's like, you're in it. You are in
Mhm.
it. And this is like a real deal. This is the most important thing you will ever do in your life because you're creating literally someone else that's going to hopefully continue to make the world a little bit of a better place
Mhm.
than how we loved it. But
No, totally. I always tell people,
yeah.
I'm like, my husband and I had a great time in our 20s. Like,
Yeah.
no regrets. Like, I think I was 29 when I had my son, but I was like, wait, like if you want to wait, like, don't let, I hate to say it,
Yeah.
but like the older generation, like, push you into it if you're not ready, because I think that arguably could make the experience even harder because now you're feeling, some type of emotion about jumping in too soon or feeling pressured into it. Yes, I think people just know when it's time, I always say when you start being bored of like your social life or going out or, like even like taking trips, like if you're just kind of bored of it all, like I think that's always a good indicator of like, well, then what's next, Yeah. And I think oftentimes that's like the baby.
Yeah. Well, it's the baby. And then I think that's how you kind of know when you're ready to get back
Mhm.
into after when you're done with babies type of feeling.
Yeah.
I think I'm there. I don't know. I'm like, I'm still so out whether or not we'll have another. Cause I'm like, I can't imagine not having another baby again.
Yeah.
Cause it's been such a pinnacle in my life, but
yeah.
I can't imagine also getting pregnant again either. So
Well, you're only a year postpartum. I mean, that's not like a ton of time.
It's fresh.
Yeah.
No, we're fresh. We're fresh.
Yeah.
We're fresh out of the gate.
Yeah,
But I'm the
you
type
are.
of person that also likes to like think about the next exciting thing. So I just I said to my husband, I was like, either we're going to go on a trip or we're going to get a puppy and we're going to buy ourselves a little bit of time and then we'll figure out what the next plan is. But
yeah, both equally as cumbersome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. All right. Well, so in final words, like with moms listening, especially because I have a lot of first time moms and stuff like that. I think stepping up and asking for help in some way, or recognizing that they may not be feeling their best, is probably the hardest portion of this whole postpartum thing. Like, what advice would you give like a first time mom? Because like, if you could look back at like a first time mom experience, like, is there anything that you wish you could have known, or anything like that?
Totally. I'm going to rattle off a quick list. Get a therapist before you have the baby, because once you have your first baby, it's like a blur and like off to the races, and you're going to have way more time and space to set up with a therapist and find a therapist you like when you're pregnant. So get connected with a therapist that you like and you trust and you feel good about moving into motherhood with. If you have had a history of any like depression or anxiety or even like OCD, things like that, I would explore medication management. There are medications that are safe to take while pregnant and breastfeeding, and I wish that I would have jumped on medication sooner. So just explore that with your provider, with your therapist, see if it would be beneficial to start that in your third trimester or when you're fresh postpartum to kind of curb those symptoms. Find that safe person, kind of start paying attention to who talks about stuff like that and who tends to stray away from it, and find the safe people to talk to. Like, have that keyword or phrase with your partner or, whoever you feel closest with, to let them know that you need extra support in that moment. And also like let them know what that extra support looks like. God bless my partner being married to a therapist. Like, I've, gone through the ringer of like, sometimes I just need you to like sit with me and like let me cry. Like when I was fresh postpartum, like, sometimes I need you to just drop everything and just like be present with me and like let me know that like I'm not alone. Like sometimes we have to tell our partners what we need, and like that's not a sign of failure. It's just some people just don't know how to support people because they were never supported as, children.
No, and I say that all the time. Like, our spouses are not mind readers. Like, I know we want them to be, and we get frustrated sometimes because we're like, they should just know. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't. And unfortunately, a lot of it's just, I get mad at my mother-in-law sometimes when moments like that happen, because I'm like, come on, like, come on.
What are we doing?
It happens. Yeah. What's going on here?
Yeah.
But, you just have to say it. Like, you have to say it. And I always say too, like, for partners, if you're listening, because I don't know if your wife is making you listen to this.
I love her for that.
Yeah. Love you. If you're listening, like, I know for me, like, you need to be their spotter. Like, you need to be your partner's spotter, and you need to watch and see if anything is off a little bit, and see if like, if there's, I think I said this in my previous episodes, and I said, if you think there's a sparkle missing out of her eye for any reason, bring it up, like bring it up and ask what's going on. And sometimes asking doesn't do crap. If you feel that concerned, you bring them somewhere and you get them help, and you kind of go from that. But you don't have to understand it either. I think that's a big portion. And I know a lot of wives reach out to me and they're like, how do I get my husband to understand like anxiety? Like, I have a partner that doesn't understand my anxiety, and he just is like, well, stop worrying. I'm like, well, it's not as simple as that, because I deal with anxiety too. It's just empathetic. Like, you don't have to understand it. Just know that it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And also NAMI, N-A-M-I, I think it's .org, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. They have like wonderful information for family members and partners of people who struggle with mental illness. So it's very informative. Like, if your partner has anxiety, depression, PTSD, postpartum, like, this is what they're feeling. This is what you can do to support them. So like, take advantage of resources like that. And also like, get the name and number of their providers, like get the name and number of their OB, get the name and number of their therapist. I don't think many partners have that information because, like, we're always handling that, and that's fine. But in the case of like postpartum, which can be such a delicate time, like, just throw those numbers in your phone in case you need them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never a bad idea at all.
Yeah.
At all. Well, this is a side conversation. Well, not side conversation. It's going back to that Lindsay Clancy case. Cause I know someone had asked if you were didn't someone say if you're going to backtrack? Didn't someone ask you if you're going to backtrack on what you were talking about? Or someone had said, I think you had posted something.
Yeah. Like, after the arraignment came out, they said like, aren't you embarrassed now or something?
Yeah.
No, I'm not, by the way. I'm not. I'm not backtracking.
No, well, the whole arraignment of it it's designed to make the prosecution's going to make her sound like crap. And either way, and I said this to someone because a lot of people in the comments on that are, it was premeditated, it was all that. And I'm like, even if it was premeditated, does it sound like she was mentally stable?
Right.
Does a mentally stable mother who has had nothing but high accolades and positive reviews for her entire motherhood experience, if she did plan it, does it sound like she was mentally all together? Like, I don't think so. Like,
right. Like, is this something that she would have planned, 6 years ago, pre-kids?
Well, I think of it too, because I'm like, their premeditation. I think of like that Christopher Watts guy that wanted a new life.
Comparison to those two is just astounding.
No, it's not the same thing because he wanted a new life. He wanted a fresh start. Like, he planned to just eliminate and start over. It wasn't this thing. And I actually looked up about after this whole case, I said looked at mothers who kill their kids and like why that happens, because it's rare. Like, family annihilators are typically the dads. And I looked up and they said usually it's because a mom is obviously mentally ill, but they look at it as like they're missing a limb. So they're not going to go on to the next stage without their limbs attached. And it's protection. A lot of times they think it's the protecting the kids is being like, they're coming with me essentially. And it's terrible. No one wants that. But like, does that sound mentally stable? Like, it's not mentally stable. Something was wrong. Tremendously.
And, the people that are like, well, she was with it enough to, Google the restaurant and place a takeout order and remember that the Miralax prescription had to be picked up. And it's like, okay, but people that are in psychosis are still carrying on their daily functions. Like, again, both things kind of exist. I used to do home visits for the VA working with vets with severe mental illness, like the schizophrenia, schizotypal. And I would be sitting in front of people having a full-blown conversation about them in college, them and their medication management. And I had one vet look right at me and said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so distracted. Like, the name of their voice keeps telling me to hurt you." And I'm like, okay, like, I appreciate you letting me know, like, what do you need right now? Whatever. But I don't think people understand that people in psychosis aren't out, they're not out walking the street, in some kind of like haze. Like, they're carrying out their daily activities and they're carrying out these conversations like any, typical person would, but they're having these really intense thoughts, like, while they're doing it. And I just wish more people knew that like, they walk among us, like, they're very present in our society and in everyday life. They're at the grocery store. They're at our kids' soccer games. Like, people are having these thoughts, and it doesn't mean that they're, that they want to follow through on them and that they want to, annihilate their family. It just gets to that point when nothing is done to intervene.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing is like the whole Googling of the restaurant. I'm like, I do that. Like, I want to know how long it's going to take. Like, I do that, especially if I'm going to be home with all three kids that are crazy band of monkeys. I want to know exactly how long I am going to be home with them and how long my food's going to take, especially if I'm hungry. So I'm like, I want to know all of this stuff, but none of that even just like stuck out to me. And the one thing that, I know there was a detail of it that like didn't, I'm forgetting now that I'm trying to like think there was a detail that I was like, I don't understand any as to why this would ever be an indicator, but now I can't remember. So but all I know is that I think something was wrong. Something was majorly wrong. She just needed the help. And I think that's just, I mean, it sparked conversation. I hope it keeps going.
Yeah. I'm nervous for the ongoing trial because, it's just the prosecution has to do their job and they're going to bring whatever they can to the table to do their job. And I get that. But like, I'm nervous for like the other moms that are like silently suffering and like what the coverage, I hope the media coverage like does so in a respectful way.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what she said. What they said that they found a note, or she had said to her husband that she kind of resented the other kids for not being able to treat her third like her first or something. And I remember they said that in the trial
like because that's a very common thought.
Oh my God. When they read that and people were like, how could she think that? And I'm like, I know exactly that feeling because I have a third
Yeah.
who literally gets the shaft. Like my second got the shaft when he was the
Yeah.
second. Like there's a reason why my third is a really great sleeper because she has to cry it out a lot. Like because there's
Mm-hmm.
no other way that I
Mm-hmm.
can get all three kids down to bed
Mm-hmm.
with there's usually someone crying, and guess who it's going to be? It's going to
Yeah.
most likely it's going to be the baby who I know I can
They
fix
can't
in one
walk up to you.
area. It's going to be the two that are literally running around with kitchen scissors while the blob is laying in the
Right.
middle of the floor. Like there's a reason I
Right.
couldn't get as much cuddle time with her. Like there's all that stuff. So it wasn't that I resented my kids. It was more like you felt bad. Like this, you
Yeah.
want to have that connecting experience with the baby, just the equally the same, but you can't. And
Yeah.
especially when your kids are all up in your face, or if you don't have the support to like come and take your kids from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really hard thing. And then even if you do have the support to come and take your kids so you can bond with the third or your second or whatever baby it is, you then feel guilty. You feel guilty that you needed to do that.
Yeah.
So I completely understood all of like everything they were saying. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is going to make every mom feel terrible.
Yes. And can you imagine the moms that are like petrified of like Googling their symptoms now or like, keeping like a mood tracker? Cause I recommend keeping mood trackers for people that struggle with like a variety of things. And I've had people be like, I don't want to keep it in my phone. Like, they don't want it to be like traceable. And it's like, how have we gotten here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all of that,
Crazy.
even like they were saying she kept like detailed notes of her day. And I was like, again, does that sound like mental, like she, to a point, like they said that it was like so like structured as to what she was recording and so on, like
that
so
sounds
meticulous.
like something a therapist would tell her to do.
Yeah, but it like I was like, there's something about like if it was so structured, I'm like, that sounds a little like OCD. Like something was obviously going on. Like again, all of this. I'm like, oh God, I hope this case. There's no winning. There's no winning in this case at all.
I know.
So it's not like she's gonna walk away and like run out of that courtroom. She can't. She's paralyzed, but she can't like run out of that courtroom skipping and jumping. She's going to be going to mental health facility,
personal health for the rest of her life.
Forever. And she'll be going to a facility and probably living out her days there. I know like the Andrea Yates case
how
that
she
people
keeps
are bringing up
passing
again.
her hearing. So sad.
I know. I had no idea about it. I looked that up and I was like, I don't blame her. I'd probably do the same exact thing. Like, what life do you want? Like, I wouldn't want to leave there. Like, to go back to what? You don't have nothing to go back to. But
I feel like we're going to need to reconvene when this trial's over. And
yes, we have all the information. It's crazy. But yeah, all that to say, if you are listening, if you're struggling, because I'm like, I won't back off of this. Like, I know I really sparked like not a content change for me, but I'm goofy. Like my content is either goofy or it's whatever. But my goofy stuff is it's at the end of the day, you're going to find my goofy stuff and be like, oh, I felt that way. Like, I just want people to know they're not alone. But I really struggle with I really am focused on like that mental health portion because it's hard. It's really scary. And it's really just like isolating. It is so isolating. And I hate that word is even associated with motherhood, but it is. And
I know
it's just one thing that like, if you're listening and you're isolated right now, like it doesn't have to be that way. And there are people that are willing to listen. It just takes a little bit of time to like find exactly who that's going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it won't last forever. Everything's temporary.
No. Yes. No. Yeah. Nothing is permanent at all. I can attest to that being a year postpartum and even a year postpartum. Like that's even like, I remember going into my annual at 1 year postpartum and they're like, nothing's brought up. And I'm like, it's just a year since I've given birth and had another life change, but no big deal. No big deal.
See you next year.
It's not a big deal. God, make sure that's what they leave you with. 6-week appointment, go in, make sure you're using birth control, send you on your way.
The focus on birth control versus like people's, anxiety and depression scales that are alarming to any other provider is just blows my mind.
Yeah. Use birth control. And also, how are you? Like that's a good conversation. But Anyway. All right. Well, so I will link all your information in the show notes. So if anyone's
Amazing.
listening, is there anywhere else that anyone can find you or that you want to make mention of? Anything?
If you need therapy in New York, you can go to convenientcounselingservices.com. And then, my Instagram and TikTok, Authentically Alicia.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
Another episode down and way more to go. But thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to help support this podcast, I would love for you to subscribe. I'd love for you to share it with others and post about it on your own social media or leave a rating and review. I cannot tell you how helpful and how appreciated those things are for me. Of course, to catch all the latest from me, you can follow me over on Instagram at The Very Merry Life, over on TikTok, The Very Merry Life. And even if you wanted to check out my monthly newsletter, you can do so by subscribing over at theverymerrylife.com. I'll see you next week. Stay tuned for more honest, raw, real chit chat. I have some amazing moms lined up coming on, and shit's going to get fun. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be good.